Guys, it's me again, and I just want to give a brief ASML Improvement Project update and talk about something different entirely, which is how I personally have found success learning a language. And the reason why I'm going to talk about that is just because a lot of people on the ASML video, or at least a few people, to be honest, the video hasn't had that many views, but a few people asked, well, how did you get to the level where you're at now? And people ask me that in my daily life when they're learning a language. They say, Tori, how did you learn? So the first thing with the ASML Improvement Project is that I didn't complete it. I got to about lesson 50 before giving up because I was bored. And one day I would love to revisit ASML and hopefully use it and only it to learn a language just to see what level it takes me to. I think I may use it for Portuguese. I believe they have a English to Portuguese version of ASML, so I'm going to look into that, and I may use it for that because I'd like to learn Portuguese, and I feel like with my background in Spanish and Italian, I could be successful using only ASML. So about my personal methods, they're kind of a grab bag, and it's unfortunate because it's really hard for, I think, a beginning learner to know where to begin, and it was hard for me too, and I think it'll always be hard, especially because language resources vary based on the language. So, for example, for me, learning Italian is way easier than learning Shami Arabic. I really struggled to find good resources for Shami. So, first off, with the Italian, I started by listening to Pimsleur, which is kind of a product of a different era. The conversations aren't all that useful, but I did kind of get an overview of grammar, of speaking, and actually I listened to the Shami Arabic of Pimsleur before I went to Jordan for the first time, and I didn't finish the whole thing. I'd only listened to the first 2 or 3 lessons. I wish I had finished the whole thing. And I found myself able to easily recall what had been said in Pimsleur and have conversations that were mostly, I don't understand Arabic, or I speak a little Arabic, because at the time that was the situation. Now, mind you, I still say I speak a little Arabic. It's just a little more Arabic than it used to be. So I start off with Pimsleur because it's easy, it gives you a broad level overview, and you can kind of get a feel and an ear for the language, and especially if you're an experienced language learner, it may feel like it's slow, but if you actually think about it and listen and hear what's being said, you may start to pick up on patterns that non-experienced language learners don't get to see. So I recommend Pimsleur always when someone tells me that they're trying to learn a language on their own. And I also recommend ASML, not that I've had success with it, but just if you're wondering, I say a lot of polyglots do very well with this, so I'd recommend looking into it. After Pimsleur, I use Michel Thomas, if there's one available, and I'm so upset that Michel Thomas doesn't have a Shami Arabic. As you can see, I'm really wanting to get my Arabic under control. It's great for grammar. Honestly, I need to listen to it for Spanish, a language which I consider myself to speak fairly well, because it taught me so much Italian grammar in so little time, and honestly, I walked into my Italian course and I feel like I was way ahead of the pack in an advanced Italian course with grammar. And even with vocab, I think I do fairly well. I'm not going to compare myself to anyone else because we're all at a different place on our journey, and I just have found a lot of success with Michel Thomas, and if you're shaky on grammar, I'd recommend it. The only grammar points that I continue to struggle with, and I think this is just perhaps a side effect of being a native English speaker, is for some odd reason, reflexive verbs are tricky. So what I do for things like this is I find a book that has exercises, and I work through that as I go. You can kind of see my little mini bookshelf behind me here, and there's a Teach Yourself Italian grammar book. I also have 50 Ways to Improve Your Italian from Teach Yourself. I really like the Teach Yourself series. I have the Teach Yourself Russian, and I haven't worked through the whole book, but at when I was studying Russian and I used Teach Yourself, I learned a lot. It's a great introduction course. I don't know for sure what exact book it is for Russian. It's one of the older ones, but it is really incredible, and it taught me to read the alphabet, and I could have simple conversations. I was translating at one point some Russian, very simple, rudimentary Russian, so I really do recommend the Teach Yourself series if it's your kind of learning. And then I use native media. Oh, I also use Anki. I want to talk about this before I talk about media. Anki is great. It's an SRS, which is a spaced repetition system, flashcard system. And what you'll do is you'll make Anki decks, and this is great for anything, not just language learning. I only use it for language learning because I'm not like a person that needs to memorize formulas or anything like that in my career, or in my studies, but you might have something where that's necessary. I don't happen to. And basically, you review your words, and then you select as to if was it easy, was it medium, was it hard to recall what it meant, and then the system for you designates how far apart to give you the word again. So if you say, oh, I got it, but it was really hard, it may show it again in a day or 2 days or 15 days, depending on how long you've been with that card. And maybe one day I'll make a whole video on Anki, because it's got some really excellent features that once you learn how to use, there's no turning back. Anki's amazing. And then I've used media to learn languages. And media, I haven't used a lot of native media, although I hope to one day. I do have some Italian books over there that are native Italian, written by an Italian. And then I have a couple books on my list, in my case, that are native Italian, some language learning books I'm really interested in that were published in Italian, so I'll check out those eventually. But it doesn't matter if you don't find native media, as long as you find translated or dubbed media, and music as well is great, and that's a native media source that you can enjoy at any fluency level. I have plenty of music in Hebrew, and I may understand a sentence or two of it at a time, 1 or 2 lines of the song, but I still enjoy listening to it, and when I hear a word in Hebrew that I recognize from a song, I can go, oh, that was in the song. I may not know what it means because I haven't looked it up, but it's a great tool for you to hear the language. So first off, I'd recommend, if you like Harry Potter and can stand Harry Potter, at least if you don't dislike Harry Potter, buy a Harry Potter book in your target language. You need to be at a base level to do this, and I want to talk about this in another video too. But once you feel like you're ready to start reading, and you don't have to be perfect, but once you have a good grasp of the basics of a language, and this will vary in time from person to person, grab a book. And again, I recommend Harry Potter because it's been translated into so many languages, and there's audio for several languages as well. So I have my Harry Potter e la Pietra Filosofale with me. My Italian version is not here right now, nor is my Arabic version. And I even have a Hungarian version, although I don't plan on learning Hungarian. That's one's for a friend. So, when you're reading, there's a lot of different ways to do it. You could do it in a way that's kind of similar to ASML. You could do kind of a parallel text approach. I have a Harry Potter book in English, so when I was reading my Italian one, I would switch between reading the Harry Potter book in English and the Harry Potter book in Italian. And that helped tremendously. Another thing you can do is listen to the audio. So I would read it in the English version first, read it with the English version while listening to the Italian audio, read the Italian version, read and listen to the Italian with the Italian audio. And that could be a clunky method for some, and I didn't do it for the whole book, I just did it for select parts. But if you have patience, maybe you could try it. And it's okay if you don't understand every word on the page. This is my book that I bought while I was living and working in Spain and studying there. And I'd already spoken kind of a rudimentary level of Spanish at the time, and you can still see how many marks I'd made. I'll hold that up once again on the first page. And I have several books in Spanish that look like this, because after I read this, I moved on to The Sicilian, which is a Mario Puzo book in Spanish, and so forth. You don't have to look up every word you don't know, And a lot of polyglots will tell you not to do that. I think it's a matter of personal preference. I prefer to know. But I've also learned plenty of words by not looking it up. I figured out pretty quick when I was reading Harry Potter in Italian without doing the parallel text and without looking it up, because I read half of the first book just reading. I figured out pretty quick that Gufo was owl. So you could see success that way. You may need to be at a slightly higher level of the language to enjoy it without translating, though. So my Italian was okay enough that I could generally understand things. I may be missing a couple words a page, and that's mostly because I have the Spanish background. If you don't have another language in the same language family's background, you may have to look up more words, or you may have to start this later. I also have, over there on my mini bookshelf, I guess I should have brought these things over here, Gossip Girl and Criminal Minds with the Italian dubs, because I know those are two series that I'm interested in. And I knew that I stood a chance of watching them. Plus, they've got the subtitles. When I was looking through what to buy, I looked for something that was dubbed in Italian and that had subtitles in Italian. So if I'm unsure, I pop on the subtitles and can watch it that way. And that's a great help. I understand a lot more with the subtitles sometimes. Now it's not a big deal, but as I was first starting out, I really needed the subtitles, and I could pause and continue. So once you've kind of built up a base doing those kinds of things, once you've been listening, once you've been studying grammar, and again, a lot of people tell you don't study grammar. I, again, recommend Michel Thomas and a book that has exercises that you like that you can study grammar. Some people will say you'll just learn it if you hear it enough. And that's true to an extent, but I also need to have the practice on some of the harder things for me. For example, sentences with several verbs in a row, or conditional tenses, things like that. I really like to have the book so I can look and reference. Not so much for the present tense. That kind of thing, if you're learned a language, you can probably pick up on pretty quick. You need something to learn your vocab, and I recommend Anki. And I will talk about major challenges associated with being a beginning learner. And one of them, by the way, is not knowing where to start and not knowing where to find vocab words and stuff like that. So I'll address that in another video. But Anki's great for vocab acquisition, as are books, media. And finally, you can kind of round out your experience with practice. And it depends on where you are. Practice may be really easy to find, or it may be really difficult. If you're in a major city in Europe, and you're learning a European language, and even if you're learning a non-European language, you could find it very easy to practice. When I started learning Italian, I was living in London, and would just go to Starbucks and find Italians. Literally every time I went into a Starbucks, I had a conversation with someone in Italian. Now, I was actively seeking out Italians, and I'd just sort of listen and hear if people were chit-chatting in Italian, or if I saw someone had a book that was like How to Learn English, or something like that, I'd say, oh, where are you from? And several times, in fact, more often than not, when I saw someone practicing their English and I'd say, where are you from? They'd go, oh, I'm from Italy. So, sorry if that was offensive. So, I really practiced with them, and I said, oh, that's funny, I'm learning Italian, and we'd have a little language exchange, and they sort of enjoyed hearing an American accent versus the English accent, and so forth. So that was great, and I highly recommend it. There's meetup.com or .org. I'm not really sure what the Meetup website is. Meetup.com, I think. And you may have an Italian language group in your area. I know there are several in mine where I live here in the States, which is a place with a huge Italian community. I haven't been to any meetups, but I did find my Italian classes. I take an advanced Italian class that I found through this meetup group. So that's not a bad place to look if you're in the States or you're not in an area with a huge Italian population. And if those two things fail, and there's literally no one in your group that can speak the language that you're studying. Let's say you're studying a really exotic language. Well, I guess it can't be too exotic, but let's say you're studying a more exotic language. Check out a website like Verbling. There's tons of online pen pal websites, and I'll put the link for Verbling, I think, down there, since Verbling's kind of a weird word. It's like a chat roulette, but for language learning. I haven't had that much luck in it with finding Italian speakers. I found Spanish speakers and I found Arabic speakers very easily on Verbally. I've not found many Italian speakers, but your luck might be different. It might be the times of day that I was signing on, things like that. So I recommend that. You can find online pen pals, Skype. If you can find someone to Skype with and practice, that's great. There's so many online people who offer teaching and tutoring that you should probably check them out. italki, you can do a free language exchange. The great thing is, living in a digital age, we can get this real life practice, and I think that's absolutely necessary. And in another video, again, I will talk about the 2 theories of language acquisition. Should you start speaking early or should you have a long silent period? But if you ask me, and what I did was I started speaking early. And I think that's really a great way. When I got to Italy 3 months after starting, I could understand a lot of Italian. I wasn't perfect. I probably will never be perfect. But I could get by, and I could speak enough that I could get across basic points. And this was about 3 months after starting learning. I knew a lot of words. I knew the word for hedgehog. Like, I could point to things. I may not always have figured out how to put it in a sentence, but I could be like, that plus that. Kind of like children speak. And again, I will talk about this later, because it's a very exciting theory for me as a language nerd. So basically, I just took 16 minutes to explain how I approach languages, and I feel like I've said nothing. But what I'm just going to say it in a nutshell again. Check out Pimsleur, check out Michel Thomas, check out ASML. You know, and there's lots of other great resources that you might like that I don't personally like. ASML is one of them, FSI is one of them. Those 2 resources, don't like them, but I think they're very good. I think the Teach Yourself series is very good. So if the language you're studying has a Teach Yourself book, go check out what they have. Go to the library. Always look in the library before buying a language book and see if it'll work for you. And as soon as you feel ready, start with native media. And if you can stand it, you should be listening to music in your target language or watching TV or doing whatever in your target language all the time, even if you don't understand it. That's if you can stand it. If you hate it and after an hour you're done, finish, stop. It's fine, just do the hour. Do not resent the language. It's not the language's fault that you don't understand it yet. Some people will advocate 24 hours a day, and I'm sure that's a brilliant method if you can stand it. But if it starts bogging down your brain, turn it off, move on. So that's basically how I would start and get practice. So good luck on your language learning. Please tell me what's worked for you down in the comments below, and make this a place that people can sort of see what helps them. And if you have anything you want to recommend or that you don't like, let us know. Thanks. Bye guys.